The Hawaiian Islands are often painted as paradise, a place where the days are golden, the nights are warm, and the trade winds carry the scent of plumeria across black sand beaches. But beneath the seeming perfection, there's another Hawaii, a quieter one, a darker one, a place where stories sometimes end without answers and where mysteries sink beneath the waves. Here, the rain falls softly over forgotten crime scenes. Trails grow cold in the shadow of emerald cliffs. And sometimes the silence of the islands says more than the evidence ever could. These are the cases that remain unsolved, the questions that stay unanswered. This is 12 Unsolved, Hawaii. Welcome to, or welcome back to, the Agatha May Detective Agency. I'm Agatha May, and I'm so glad you're here. In this episode of 12 Unsolved, we're traveling to the Aloha state to look at 12 cold cases that range from 1971 to 2012. I'm going to start this episode a little differently. While researching cold cases, I kept coming across cases from the 70s and 80s of women who had been strangled on Oahu, and all were within 35 minutes of each other. I think there might have been a serial killer that was never caught, or maybe he was caught and then let go. In January 2025, 66-year-old Gideon Castro was arrested for the murder of one of these cases, the murder of Don Momahara. They matched his DNA to DNA at the crime scene. However, they released Castro in March of this year because of, quote, recent complications involving a material witness in his case and the state of the evidence. That sounds like someone backed out of being a witness, and if they could match DNA, I'm not sure what state the evidence could be in that wouldn't guarantee his conviction. Castro would have only been 12 when our first victim was killed, so I don't think he's a serial killer. It will be interesting to see where Don's case goes from here. I'm including all 6 victims that I think might possibly be connected in our first case. On February 24, 1971, the body of 54-year-old Eleanor May Brusenbach was discovered in a cane field off West Lock Road in Ewa. Investigation revealed that she had been strangled and possibly sexually assaulted. On June 16, 1974, the body of 30-year-old Alana Bailey was discovered in a wooded area off the side of Nu'uanu Pali Drive. Reports indicate that she had been assaulted and strangled to death. The body of 16-year-old Margaret Agnes Hayanio was discovered on March 18, 1975, on a dirt road in the Waipahu area. She had been sexually assaulted and had a skull fracture. Her mouth and hands were taped, and she was tied up with a rope in such a way that if she moved her legs, she would be strangled. On December 24, 1975, Ingrid Lori Ostrenga was found deceased in her Kailua residence. She had been strangled. On March 21, 1977, 16-year-old student Don Momahara was discovered on the second floor of a building at McKinley High School. Reports indicate that she had been sexually assaulted and strangled. On October 8, 1984, 22-year-old Helen Carrillo was found in a cane field in the Kaunia area. Reports indicate that she had been strangled. If you have any information about these cases, please contact the FBI office in Honolulu at 808-566-4300. June 25, 1973 was a warm summer day in Honolulu. 13-year-old Matthew Potter left his family's home on Sibley Street just after noon, planning to meet up with friends at Waikiki Beach. But Matthew never made it to the beach. That night, around 10 p.m., the elevator doors at the Kalia Inn, an unassuming hotel near Waikiki, slid open to reveal a grim scene. Matthew's body was inside. He had been stabbed to death and then placed in the elevator. His mother told investigators that Matthew had left home with 55 cents, but investigators found a single dime in his pocket. Perhaps the missing 45 cents was bus fare. The investigation into Matthew's death went nowhere quickly. and no suspects were ever named. Apart from a handful of newspaper clippings, the case seemed to have just dissolved. Matthew's father was stationed in Honolulu with the Navy at the time, but not long after his son's murder, he was sent elsewhere. So the family left the island, carrying their grief with them. If you have any information on the death of Matthew, please contact the Waikiki Police Department at 808-529-3801. On the morning of June 21st, 1977, Charlotte Marcella Moriarty took her son Marks for a walk in his stroller. The stroller was found at approximately 1 p.m. at the bus stop at 54-295 Kamehameha Highway. Mark Barnes, the then boyfriend of Charlotte and father to Marks, filled a missing persons report on July 10, 1977, more than 2 weeks after he found the stroller. In the report, he explained to police that Charlotte had been missing on several prior occasions, but she had returned home and that he thought this was another incident of her leaving for no reason. For decades, there was no trace of Charlotte or Marks. But 35 years later, Marks was found in New Jersey, living as Steve Carter. He had noticed that his birth certificate hadn't been filed until he was a year old, and that made him curious. So he started doing some digging and found a composite sketch of Marks and was surprised to see how much they looked alike. In 2011, DNA testing confirmed that he was indeed Marks. He also discovered that back in 1977, he and his mother had been discovered in an Oahu woman's home. She called the police, and Charlotte made up new names, Jame Amy and Tenzin Amy, and a new birth date for her son. Charlotte was taken to a psychiatric hospital, while Marks went into protective care. A few days later, Charlotte left the hospital against the advice of medical staff, leaving Marks a ward of the state. He was placed in an orphanage and adopted by the Carters 3 years later. Charlotte, however, is still missing. She hasn't been seen since she left that hospital back in 1977. If you have any information about the disappearance of Charlotte Moriarty, please contact the Honolulu Police Department at 808-529-3111. Torrential rains blew over the island of Oahu the night of January 20th, 1982, but that didn't stop 19-year-old Lisa O from meeting her boyfriend, Doug Holmes, at a party being held at his sister's apartment. Lisa left the hair salon where she worked in Honolulu, stopped to buy sashimi and poke, and then went to the party. Around 12:30, Lisa called her roommate to let her know she was headed back home, and she and Doug parted ways in the parking lot. Doug was headed back to the dorm at the University of Hawaii, and Lisa was headed to her apartment in Kailua. But Lisa never made it home that night. By the next morning, her roommate contacted Lisa's parents and Doug to let them know. Doug was worried that Lisa had been in an accident due to the heavy rains, so he traced the route she would have taken to get home. He located her car parked on the side of the road in Monowili, about a mile from her apartment. The driver's side window of Lisa's car was rolled down, and there was 2 to 3 inches of water in the floor of her car. Her purse, wallet, and keys were found inside the car, and there was still money in her wallet. 11 days later, Lisa's body was found on January 31st, 1982, near the summit of Mount Tantalus by a man walking his dog. She was about 40 feet down an embankment and was only a few miles from Doug's sister's apartment. Police suspected that perhaps Lisa had been pulled over by someone posing as a police officer and then killed and taken to where her body was found. They had questioned several suspects, including an actual police officer, but no one has been arrested in connection to her death. If you have any information about Lisa's case, please contact the Honolulu Police Department at 808-529-3111. In the dim, pre-dawn hours of September 8, 1986, the island of Oahu was shrouded in a veil of mist, and the air was thick with an unsettling quiet. Beneath the towering expanse of the H1 freeway and the looming shadow of the Waikele overpass, the body of 21-year-old Gregory M. Yamada was found on what was then known as a cane haul road, an isolated path that wound through the remnants of sugarcane fields. Gregory had been brutally beaten, and then his body was callously discarded over the side of the freeway. At exactly 6:13 p.m. that same day, a new thread in the mystery emerged. An unidentified male was captured on surveillance video and he was using Gregory's ATM card at the Waianae branch of Honolulu Federal Savings and Loan. But even with that surveillance footage, no suspects have been named in Gregory's case. If you have any information about his death, please contact the Honolulu Police Department at 808-529-3111. August 25, 1986, was a lazy afternoon on the island of Kauai, and the sun cast long shadows across the lush green landscape of Anahola. It was here where Stacy Kelekoma was last seen. She was only 14 and had run away from home to live with her boyfriend. According to that boyfriend, he had left Stacy watching television while he went to the store. When he returned, he said the television was still on. Stacy's slippers were at the door, but she was nowhere to be found. Later that year, a steward with an airline claimed to have seen Stacy in California, but that sighting has never been confirmed. If you have any information about Stacy's disappearance, please contact the Kauai Police Department at 808-241-1711. On January 11, 1990, a man looking for discarded aluminum along the roadway near the Heiakea Boat Harbor in Kaneohe, Hawaii, made an unexpected discovery. There, abandoned on the side of the road, was the body of 25-year-old Mildred Gumbo. She was nude and had been assaulted and strangled. Mildred had only recently returned to Hawaii after spending a year on the mainland. In the days leading up to her death, she had been staying with her estranged husband, Joseph Martall. But that reunion seemed to be more circumstance than reconciliation. According to him, Mildred had been out late on the night of January 9th with a man he merely described as a local. She had returned home, and then she left again around 4 a.m., taking her husband's car. His car was later found abandoned in the parking lot of the Kaneohe Bay Shopping Center, a couple of miles from where Mildred's body was found. No one ever came forward, and no suspects were ever named. If you have any information about Mildred's death, please contact the Honolulu Police Department, Kaneohe, at 808-723-8640. On June 13, 1998, Michelle Adam was last seen leaving her home in the Miloli Beach Lots, a quiet, sun-baked stretch along South Kona, Hawaii. She drove away in her 1997 Toyota Celica and vanished. According to her husband, Michelle had said she needed her space before she left. He assumed she was heading to their second home in the Hawaiian Ocean View Estates, tucked away in the remote district of Kau. It wasn't until 4 days later, on June 17th, that he reported her missing. He claimed he found her car parked outside that second home 2 days after she disappeared, but there was no sign of Michelle. At the time, she worked as a clerk at the Kona Circuit Court, living a life that on the surface seemed steady. 4 months after Michelle vanished, a suspicious fire gutted their Miloli Beach Lots home. The flames took what was left of her personal life, scorching away lingering pieces of the story. Whether the fire is connected to her disappearance has never been determined. Her husband eventually left Hawaii. Authorities now believe that Michelle was the victim of foul play. No one has ever been charged, and no trace of Michelle has ever been found. If you have any information about her disappearance, please contact the Hawaii County Police Department, Kailua Kona, at 808-326-4646. On a loud, crowded 4th of July in 2000, Carlos Vicente Carrillo disappeared. Carlos was a promoter for the Evolution Waikiki nightclub and was last seen by his girlfriend inside the club around 2 a.m. The story that followed spiraled quickly. A bouncer from the club was arrested for kidnapping Carlos's girlfriend, forcing her into a car and driving her against her will to the Pearl Ridge area. Other employees said Carlos and this same bouncer had argued earlier that night. A man who looked like Carlos was reportedly knocked down on the street by several unidentified individuals sometime between 2 a.m. and 5 a.m. But that lead, like so many in this case, faded into uncertainty. Authorities could never confirm it was him. The bouncer later claimed that he had given Carlos a ride to the airport, saying he planned to fly to Las Vegas. But there was no plane ticket in Carlos's name, No boarding records and no security footage that showed him in the terminal. Shortly after his disappearance, police found a stained piece of carpet tossed in a dumpster near the club. The nature of the stain was never confirmed. No one has ever been arrested in connection to Carlos's case. If you have any information, please contact the Honolulu Police Department at 808-529-3111. On the evening of November 7th, 2007, William Eriksson was last seen climbing into a vehicle outside a small general store in the Mountain View area of Puna, Hawaii. His cell phone would ping for the final time at 8:31 p.m., and after that, there was nothing. William had simply disappeared. It would be 2 weeks before anyone reported him missing. William didn't own a car. He got around the island by bus or grabbed a ride from someone. He had moved to Hawaii just a year before, trading in his roots in Malibu, California for the Big Island. He found work doing construction and tree servicing and spent his free time surfing and hanging around downtown Hilo and Kona. By all accounts, he was well liked and had no known enemies. William was very close to his mother, and he wasn't the type to have just vanished without telling her where he was going. The police suspect foul play, but with no vehicle of his own and no traceable trail, the investigation soon came to a stop. If you know anything about William's disappearance, please contact the Hawaii Police Department at 808-935-3311. Just after 7 o'clock on the evening of September 23, 2008, Marlo Moku made a quick stop at a 7-Eleven on Keumana Drive in Hilo, Hawaii. She originally planned to bring her 2-year-old daughter with her, but her boyfriend convinced her to leave the child at home. Marlo drove off alone and then vanished. For weeks, there were no phone calls and no sightings, just nothing. Then, nearly 3 weeks later, on October 10th, Marlo's blue 1995 Chevrolet Corsica was found at the base of a 120-foot cliff in Hakalau. The vehicle was mangled from the fall, but something about it seemed off. The license plate had been stripped clean from the car, presumably from its descent down the cliff. Investigators searched the car using luminol but found nothing. There was no sign that anyone had been inside the car when it went over the edge. It appeared as if the wreck had been staged. Marlo was a devoted mother of 3, and those who knew her insist she would never abandon her children. They also say the idea of her running away or taking her own life never made sense. Marlo took medication for an unnamed mental illness, but her family said that even without her medication, even in her darkest moments, she would have never taken her own life. If you have any information about Marlo's disappearance, please contact the Hawaii County Police Department at 808-961-2383. On the night of May 13, 2012, Mother's Day, Loida Wideman left her Waipahu home in Honolulu, Hawaii around 9:30 p.m. She was on her way to work as a nurse's aide at a local care home. It was a familiar drive for Loida and was just another typical evening, but she never made it to work. Loida was known for being reliable and was a mother who would have never left her 3 sons behind. 4 days later, her 2003 Saturn Ion was found abandoned on Lehua Avenue near First Street in Pearl City, several miles from her home. Authorities brought in a bloodhound, and the dog traced Loida's scent from the car to a nearby bike path. The trail led to a row of dumpsters, but when investigators searched them, they found nothing. Suspicion naturally circled around her ex-husband, Lionel Reginald Wideman, a man with a violent criminal history, including attempted murder. He'd been paroled just 2 years before Loida disappeared. But despite the shadows trailing him, police stated he was not a suspect in the case. There have been no suspects named in her case, and her sons are still waiting to find out what happened to their mother. If you have any information about Loida's disappearance, please contact the Honolulu Police Department, Pearl City, at 808-529-3111. 12 lives with 12 families waiting for answers. Hawaii is a place where stories cling to the rocks, where the trade winds carry secrets, and where some mysteries are swallowed by the sea. But the islands remember even when the rest of the world forgets. But our journey doesn't end here. Next time, we're heading to Idaho, a state of towering mountains, endless forest, and quiet towns where unsolved cases linger in the shadows of the pines. In the land of hidden lakes and winding back roads, the silence speaks volumes. Somewhere, the truth is still waiting, and we'll keep looking for it. Thank you so much for being here for another episode of 12 Unsolved, and forgive me for the place names that I probably butchered. Please like, share, and comment as this helps my channel grow. Remember to subscribe to be notified when a new video drops. Paid memberships help me keep the search alive, one story, one state at a time. Thank you for helping me bring these cold cases out of the shadows. Until next time, stay safe and be happy.